Hello, everyone. This is a show called Real Talk with Martha Novak, and I'm said Martha Novak. I'm awfully glad you're with us today. We're talking about an incredibly important subject. You know, this show is about consciousness, and I think this is a show I need to double back to from time to time, this particular subject, because what's consciousness, right? I think that we've got to start at a fundamental level. We certainly have to get our thinking open to, and hopefully down the road in alignment with some of the things that we say that are conscious and that the world is telling us. The world is telling us a lot that isn't conscious as well, but we're about opening to different perceptions here. So that's what we're going to talk about today. It's the bottom line of what it is that unites all things. So we're going to explain some of that in just a minute. It's going to be an exciting show, I believe. And this is a live show. So the call-in number is 347-850-1647. If you all want to be a guest on the show, that's the number for this. And if not, to listen to this show, and I'm preaching to the choir, but I don't know who'll listen to this later because everything is archived, right? You can certainly always listen to the live show through our website, which is marthanovak.com, and under radio shows, there's a button to push. Well, hello, everyone. I'm awfully glad you're with us today. Hey. Wonderful. Delighted you're here. All right, let's do a quick prayer. Helps center me, get me on the same page for you, and we will launch off into our show today. Dear God, thank you so much for uniting us all under the banner of you. We appreciate it with all our hearts that we are open now. We're opening our minds past what we know to possibly see more here that you would show us. You are all we are, but we get in the way of this wonderful, great energy, this beneficence of you. And I want you to show us, please, today, how we're doing that we may challenge that in us and move past these things into a deeper level of consciousness. We thank you so much, dear God, for all of this. And we say now, gladly, we surrender, knowing anything. For it is the you through us and all things that know it all and that see the global picture. And that is a part of us too. We move into that energetic arena to be one with you for these 90 minutes and beyond, if we so choose. We thank you, dear God, for all of this. We say this now in your name and in the name of the Ascended Masters, our love-centered guides and friends, and in the name of each and every person listening to this show today, or whenever they do listen to it, and so it is. Amen. Okay, kids, so let's talk about what consciousness is. I'm going to also tell you a little bit here about the way I am speaking to you, because I think what confuses us sometimes about the word consciousness is everything has consciousness, all right? Everything has consciousness. We talk about the consciousness of the crowd, the consciousness of the riot, the consciousness of the news, the conscious. Okay, that's not the consciousness that I'm talking about. When I talk about consciousness, I'm talking about the esoteric journey to and it's a triad that gets you there, of awareness, again, being aware of the mind, and what the mind is thinking, how it perceives the world, how it perceives itself. And not only that, but it is with a large C. I always, when I'm writing about consciousness and when I'm thinking about consciousness, sometimes things are small case, consciousness, and sometimes things are large case, consciousness. Consciousness is really the journey the ascended God puts us on. God itself puts us on, quite frankly, because we all start out in the ego child's mind. We all have blocks to deeper levels of consciousness. And if we go far enough into consciousness, we reach enlightenment, because the triad is this: awareness to consciousness to enlightenment. There it is. But what are we aware of? Well, certainly whatever issues we have, whatever blocks we're having, whatever patterns are in our way, where they came from, who we are. We need to look at those things, because that's what opens the door to deeper consciousness. And if you go far enough, that's what opens the door to enlightenment. Pretty powerful stuff, huh? So, that said, I think all of us are confused about God. I see it constantly. I think because we're confused about God, we can easily forget that we're creating our lives, and that we are the aspect of God known as us, and we are making decisions and going forward with that. So many people are afraid to be responsible for themselves, as if God didn't exist inside. Well, it doesn't in a way, because they're not waked up to that. Now, here I am using a word like awake. I want you to forget this awoke movement. Throw it out. I no disparagement to that. God bless them. They may have that. But we're talking about something that isn't talked about here very often, and that is consciousness itself. Consciousness itself is beyond anybody's platforms. It's beyond anybody's issues about this or that, or politics, or the economy, or anything else. We're talking about energy here, an energy that is inside you, that results if you use it, and if you explore it, and if you deepen it, it results in your potential. There it is, plain and simple. And this isn't like a goalpost that you punt yourself over. No, indeed, it's a realm of energy that's very exciting. And the earlier you can get there, the better. However, the brain isn't fully developed until you're in your 20s. So that you didn't know it before, or that you're growing through it as you grow older, is perfectly normal. It's the organic process. We want to give you credit for that, because a lot of people go back and beat themselves up for not knowing 20 years ago. And what good is that? It's like beating up a child because I have a dog. His name is Toffel, and he was talking to one of the cats that he didn't think should be prattling around. So anyway, sorry about the sound. All right. So our ideas of God have to grow up. And a lot of people are very disturbed by this. It's part of the maturing process, though, isn't it? You know, it's like beating up a child for not being able to drive the car when they're 7. You weren't supposed to drive the car. You weren't supposed to know about those things. You weren't mature enough in many, many ways. Right? Still yet, that's part of our egoic devices, because when we set our intention for consciousness, for this esoteric journey, it is unknown, and the ego child's mind. By the way, let's explain that too, for those of you that are new to me. The ego does not develop in any of us until we're 18 months old. 18 months old. And at the same time, the ego child's mind is developed. The ego child's mind. This is the part of you that throughout your life, until you conquer it, and that's what consciousness is, isn't it? That you it's not so much conquer it. It is a mastery of the mind, but you are moving past it. You're having a more global consciousness, and you're not forced to look at that no option place anymore. You're seeing much more than that. You're going to see me reach behind my back because the dog is sitting at my back and he is just constantly having something to say today. We've got to wake up to the fact that God is we are the aspect of God as us. We are the aspect of God as us. But we also have this ego child's mind. Before 18 months old, all time is now. All time is now. So something happens to you that gives you pain, scares you, and you latch onto that as, well, that's what your life will be like, because all time is now, you see? When 18 months happens, around that time, enough perceived bad things have happened for the consciousness to, small c, to start saying, well, I need a protection. So it creates the ego, and the ego child's mind that is charged with keeping you alive, safe, and intact. One of the ways it does this is to make sense of your world. Now, all children are by nature self-involved. So based on appearances, everything comes back to you. The father, who's a workaholic, is saying to the ego child's mind, so it perceives, I don't have time for you, your work isn't valuable to me, you're not valuable to me, you don't matter. But is that true? No. The truth is, your dad's imbalanced and is a workaholic for whatever insecure reason he has. Has nothing to do with you. And yet, every single child, because it's our nature, we're finding out who we are relative to our families and the world. We're all going to form our issues about ourselves, our God, our parents, our world, families in general, our brothers and sisters, relationships outside the family, our relationship to, yes, animals, like the one sitting behind me. Guys, that's what kids do. But consciousness is about waking up past that. Now, in my business, I work with two parts of you. I work with the ego child's mind, which is going to be telling me all your issues and all the convolutions that are down there. Because you see, the tricky thing here is the ego child's mind makes bad things good and good things bad in your way of doing things, in your book of you, okay? It makes bad things good and good things bad. We got to find all those things for you and write them. Now, how do you write them? Well, because all this is just energy. It's based on appearances. As soon as we challenge that, that's why cognitive therapy works so well. As soon as we challenge that, wow, you see something else. We go a step further here in my business. We change the energy. We work with your energy. We just move the energy out of one thing and into another, into a bigger arena. The child's world, the child sees everything based on appearances, and it's narrow and it's small. That's what your issues are. You zone in on your issues and you're narrowing your focus. It's like only seeing the plant in the room instead of the whole thing. That's wonderful, you see. That's a good exercise to do, by the way. Narrow your focus to one thing and then open your focus up to everything. See things you might not have seen before. This subject of God is most essential to the study of consciousness. I don't see how one does anything else. I mean, who or what is God? You know, we ask questions when we don't know, like, is God really with us and looking out for us? Is anybody up there? Where has God been all this time? Where is God when I'm suffering? Why hasn't he revealed himself before now? What about this weird concept of oneness? What the heck is that? The interesting thing is consciousness does answer those questions. It really does. Here's a real important fact, and something that people get confused about in the study of God. God presents two ways according to our understanding. What's the most important phrase in that? According to our understanding. God presents two ways according to our understanding. God presents as the absence of itself. By the way, welcome to the egoic child's mind, who sees the absence of God, the lack. And God presents as the fullness of itself. That's the higher self mind. The energy of the absence of God is fear. The energy of the fullness of God is love. This is your journey, your quest, the Holy Grail, to go from the fear-based self to the love-based self. Don't you see? It's the deepening of consciousness. In my opinion, I think in future years, this is, I think right now, actually, but people don't know it yet, this is the new frontier. This is the new frontier. People don't yet know about all this that we're talking about. But they must. I'll read you something at the end of this show that I think is enormously important, that brings it all together. By the way, a lot of this that I'm taking today's lecture from, and then, you know me, I launch off, is from the first book that I ever wrote, which is, I still think it's enormously valid, The Life You Want. I don't remember what year I wrote this. It was a few years ago, not too long ago. But it sure is becoming more and more valid with what's happening out there in the world. Okay. So, if everything is energy, and it is, if, we can, there are people who have been hurt by formalized religions. No. Here's the cat, that always makes its appearance. You guys are so patient with me. I'm having to move this over so he won't walk in front of the camera with his little butt and tail. One of the things that I think is important is that we become cognizant more and more of our energetic life. Our energetic life. This is extremely important because everything is energy, you see. You might deny God because we've been hurt by formalized religion, many of us, okay? We may not like that word. I say you shouldn't let a word stop you from doing this. Because really, it's all about energy. God is energy. You know what the Bible says? Even the Bible says, I am that I am. That's how God describes itself. I am that I am, not I am who I am. See, you're the who of God. You're the aspect of God known as you. And that leads us to the Trinity, doesn't it? The Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Well, who are these people? All right? We all hear about Jesus being the Son. Yes and no. The Father that inner voice that knows inside you, the aspect of God, the authentic being that you are, in the energy of the ascended self, consciousness, God. God in the ascended aspects. Because God presents us two ways according to our understanding, right? As the absence of itself, as the fullness of itself, the ego child's mind, or the highest self. Which mind are you in? That's what it always comes down to in the end, doesn't it? Which mind are you in? To think this particular thought and to think that particular thought. The absence of God is always fear-based. The fullness of God is always love-based. Which mind are you in? Okay. No matter which mind you're in, no matter if you have been hurt by organized religion, you cannot deny one aspect of existence, and that is everything. Everything is energy. The dog, the cat, the tree, the flower, the falling leaves off the trees, the pebble in the yard, the car, everything. Everything is energy. And that's God. Don't you understand? Everything is God. You see, consciousness is not something that people are walking around with. They miss it as they focus on how hard things are, the lack of things, their deprivation. That's the ego child's mind, isn't it? The higher self mind, the mind you all are going to, the mind you're listening to this show to open, sees a fullness in everything, including you. Where's self-loathing now? Stop focusing on the lack. Open, open. There is a fullness of God in you as much as anything else, and you've got a choice, ultimately, each moment, to be in the fullness of God or the absence of God. Now, here's the rub. You can't be in fantasy about it. Fantasy is its own reward. You can't listen to a show like this and go, I'm going to believe in fullness. My gosh. Really? Doesn't work that way. No. It's going to get you the slightest little nudge, but it's not going to do anything. You see, this is a world where you have to commit. You have to be a part of this energy. You have to really believe it. Now, nobody starts out believing this. You see, there are 4 bodies of you, mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual. Do you understand that? And when I present something like this, if you've never been on this journey, you go, this sounds great. I'm going to do that. I'm going to be, the fullness of God. From now on, I'm going to find my potential in it. It's just going to be great. And we go to some of these marvelous positive thought churches, and we do what we do, and we join groups, and we can't sustain it. Because you don't really believe it except in your mental body. Your mental body is really interesting. You don't have to put your life on the line there. You don't have to really believe in yourself and your work and what you do and your relationships and commit to anything. It's just mental thought. You're just entertaining the idea, right? And we say, because we're there, we say, oh, we believe. But guys, consciousness is not in place until all 4 bodies believe it. You must believe mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually, and live your life accordingly. Now we're talking about you've been in the energy of your potential. You're in the energy of your excellence. Now we're talking about you really listening to the inner and knowing what to do as a next step and a next and a next. There you go. So don't be fooled when you say, God, I mean, people come to me, and I'm delighted they do, and they say, it's in my mental body. And I'll say, well, let's get to work. Because God didn't leave something out of you. You weren't behind the door when God gave out these beneficences. No. You just have to know more about God. Part of your knowing more about God is getting your misperceptions out of the way. We misperceive. And our life results in those misperceptions. First of all, we sometimes think the ego child's mind is God speaking to us because it's something that we want. And we've got to learn the difference between the ego child's mind and the higher self mind, and that takes a little doing. That's the first thing I do with you when new clients come. I say, let's talk about what the ego child's mind is saying to you. Let's get some of that out of the way. But here's a tip. Here's the difference. Here's how you can tell the difference if you're honest with yourself. And real emotional honesty comes a little bit down the road, see? This is why it's esoteric, kids. Here's how to tell. Ego child's mind is always self-indulgent. Ego child's mind has as its base itself. In other words, I didn't want to hurt that person. That's why I didn't tell the truth. No, you didn't want them to hurt you if you told them the truth. It's always about you at the base. Okay? It's always based in fear and lack, whether you admit it or not. It's always about you, or by the way, it's about them, which is really about you, because you've just made yourself a victim. So it's really all about you. That's the ego child's mind. We all have it. Don't beat that up. That's where the energy starts of your potential. It just changes into something else the deeper you are. You see. It's very exciting the way it all happens. The highest self has a formula, which the ego child's mind does not have. Here's the formula. Me and you work together and have an agreement to agree or disagree. That's the higher self mind. It's a win-win situation, even if there's a disagreement. I heard something last night. I can't remember. I think it was a crime show or something. And there was great contention between a policeman who just was sure that they got the right guy and this journalist who was sure they did not. All right? And they just, went back and forth about this. It's real interesting because you could tell after all these years, 20 years had gone by or so, that they grudgingly did like each other. That's fabulous. That's what I'm talking about. It is what you get to in the higher self mind. There's a mutual respect, even if you don't agree. You see? So, when I'm talking about energy, that's what we're talking about right now. Here's the mind-blowing thing. You and I, in seemingly different locations and seemingly different in our beliefs and what we do and our walks of life, aren't separate at all. We are one, as is, by the way, the living space between us. Everything, it's all alive. Everything that we call life is this energy. All information known and unknown. History lived and yet to be lived. Science discovered and yet to be discovered. And literature written and unwritten. It all exists in this energy. Isn't that exciting? I think it's the most exciting thing in the world. Literally everything in this universe is made of what science calls the 0-point field, which is this energy, which is, by the way, are you ready? Consciousness. So if we look at everything from the broadening perspective of consciousness, we see that everything's the same energy. Fantastic as it seems, it is the energy of infinite potential. It just hasn't been formed into anything yet. And this is what people forget. They forget that this is their energy. Is it their energy when they're mad at their fathers? Nope. That's the narrowing focus. Is it energy when they don't believe in themselves and they feel lousy and think they'll never be anything? Nope. They're in the way. They're in the ego child's mind instead of this energy of their potential. It's not something you earn by being a good little boy and girl. That's what our old religions have told us, right? This is something you open to by changing from one mind to another. All part of you, though. Nothing should be vilified. The energy of self-loathing that sometimes exists in the ego child's mind, when you work on lightening that and resolving some of those past issues, it changes into caring about oneself. Because it's the right thing to do. By the way, that's always the commonality that everything you ever do in the higher self has, which is, it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to say. It's the right thing to do next. Absolutely. To explain consciousness further, let's use an image. Let's use the image of a prism. And if I had a prism here, it would refract light in a million different little ways all around the room, right? Well, each of us are a refraction of that light, depending on where we land and what kind of surface, and we're refractions of that light. But we deny sometimes, or never even think of the fact that we are part of this. And we are. The interesting thing is one refraction better than another? It is not. Hierarchy is something man-made. We've created our businesses to reflect that. Chairman of the board, president, blah, 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 all the way down. We've created our families that way, head of the family, mother next, little children in pecking order, then the dog and cat. Guys, in this energy of God, there is no hierarchy. Everything is God. And everything has its purpose. Last week, I went so far as to say everything is God. The pebble in the yard is God. The pebble being the best pebble it can be, adding its energy, who it is, to this place. Everything is the tree, the bench outside. Everything is. My husband's listening to something downstairs. I don't know whether you heard that, but I'm listening to him laugh. I don't know what it is. Maybe Saturday Night Live or something. Who knows? Everything is energy. Am I more important than the pebble in the yard? No, I'm just different. Nobody is better or worse than anybody else. So what does this mean when you go in and ask your boss for a raise? Is the boss there that has far more power than you. Why? Because he's got a title. Why? Because he has more money. Come on. If you all are the same energetically, you just make a good case and you say, yeah, here it is. What do you think you can do for me here? Can we find a way for me to make a little more money? You're the same. People like to believe we're different, though. And it's the ego child's mind that tells us all that we're different, we're separate. People will hurt you. No, guys, you have to grow up emotionally and realize that you've got to learn how to handle these things beautifully. And from the highest self, that's where everything, that's where your spiritual and emotional maturity lie. Okay. But nothing's what it seems here. I want to read you a little something, okay? A couple of years ago, I was working with a client. Again, this is from the book, The Life You Want. Can we even see it? The Life You Want. All right. You can buy this on the website, by the way. Good price. A couple of years ago, I was working with a client who was examining her belief that God wasn't there for her. We traced this thought back to a belief she inherited from her father. She was surprised at this discovery. She said, oh, no, this is not about my dad. It seemed completely contradictory to her, since her father had appeared to be deeply religious and that she believed the image that he projected. I took exception to what she was saying to me because I'd heard her stories. And I went on to say, you've described how fearful your father is. Didn't you say he was constantly worried about losing his job, feeding his family, and being overlooked time and time again at work? He never fulfilled himself, always held back, and harbored secret resentments about more successful people. She told me all of this, right? She agreed that all of those things were true. So I asked her, do you think that anyone who lives this way really knows the fullness of God? And she was stunned at this new image of her dad, which, by the way, happens a lot in what I do. Her father had been religious, but not because of his trust in God, but in reaction to his fear that God was not there for him or anyone else. These things were never talked about in the household, but psychologists will tell you that it is not what's said in the house that has the impact, but what is lived there. What you tolerate in your life and the beliefs you unknowingly hold say everything about you and your degree of consciousness. Guys, watch the news. Tells you everything about everybody's degree of consciousness. Now, do I really want you to go, oh, look at all that consciousness? No. I want you to work on you. This isn't about other people. It's just an interesting world. It's about you and what you are going to do with this. People tell you the consciousness they're in loudly and clearly. Those of you that have had really lousy relationships need to listen. Need to wake up out of a fantasy that you want this to work and listen and observe people as they really are. If you work on yourself too, you're going to attract what you are. Because whether we like it or not, our level of consciousness is reflected in the people and the situations and our work around us. They're giving us what we need to see to work on. And instead we rail at it. And we leave that job and we go to another one just like it. We leave that person and go to another relationship just like it. Guys, no, that's not waking up. We're supposed to see and experience and fix it. Dears, these issues are nothing more than a channel of energy going one way. And we can fix the energy and have it go in the direction you choose, but you have to resolve that way first. Does that make sense? You have to resolve it. We have to talk about it. We have to do a little energy work on you. And then the energy goes in the direction you want it to go. I keep going back to that image that I've told you all before. When you look in the mirror and you see your hair sticking out all different which ways, which mine's probably doing, what do? You take a comb or a brush and you fix your hair, right? Maybe add a little spray. But if we take that out of the literal image there and we make it about consciousness, we look in the mirror and see ourselves because life is showing us that, and we yell at the mirror, or we walk away and never look in the mirror again and hide away from anybody who can tell us the truth. Wow. We have to wake up. So the father in that story was not what he seemed. Nothing is what it seems here, by the way. You're not what you seem. I'm not what I seem. Nobody is what they seem. There are deeper levels here at work. And this is the fascination of it all, isn't it? It is. This is the esoteric journey. What do we not know? It isn't what you know about yourself that's going to heal you, by the way. It's what you don't know yet. But you will if you ask for it, if you seek it, if you're open to it, if you'll stop avoiding it. Let me put this on the table. Let's consider, since absence is the thing that the ego child's mind sees, the absence of God based on its understanding. Let me knock that thought down for a minute. Absence is a state that contains all potential. So, is there ever any absence? Nope. Since absence is a void, and a void contains all potential, you can make anything with it. Nothing has been formed. Its very nature is actually fullness. The experience of absence has to do with our level of understanding. Nothing else. It's all fullness, but the illusion of absence that is created in the child's mind. And it's unconsciously, by the way, adopted from the people usually around them. In fact, it always is. And from society itself and the television and everything that tells you sometimes, well, they're not giving you ascended information in many cases, are they? So the child grows into an adult and carries with him the belief in the absence in all its fearsome forms, abandonment, distrust, worry, loss, heartbreak, a belief in limited resources and limited possibilities. The ego's job was to make sure you survived. That's the ego's job in the ego child's mind, is to make sure you survive. But darlings, you have survived. And now it's about turning your attention to something else. All of this, ultimately, all of this is about you waking up to realize, wait a minute, God is all I am. Either the absence of itself or the fullness of itself is what I'm living. And I need to wake up and challenge these old beliefs in the absence of God understanding. Because when you release those, what happens to that energy? Does it just dissipate into the atmosphere? No. Here's what happens. when you release things that don't belong in the emotional body, things that don't belong, when you really do find the bottom line answers of these things and you've resolved it, the energy changes and goes into the spiritual body. And the things that should belong in the emotional body deepen. What are those things? Well, all of the system, love and unconditional love, both of which are capable, but only in consciousness. You're capable of, but only in consciousness. Certainly unconditional love is battered around by society way too much. Oh my God, I hate that phrase, the way society uses it. Someone should love you unconditionally. How about you loving yourself unconditionally? How about you going on that journey? How about you finding out what even the word love means? You see? Compassion is there. Forgiveness is there. Unless you think you've forgiven everything and everybody. There are tests on the internet to take. I pulled one from my advanced class. My advanced class has been with me a long time. Some of these people have studied for years. And I say years, I'm talking about 22 years. Needed a sip of tea. Getting a little hoarse in there. And I gave that to them about 5 years ago, this forgiveness test. And everybody in the class failed. Not one person came out ahead on that one. So guys, forgiveness is something like trust. We can't fix it like that. It's a core issue. We're going to go all the way down to your core, to your nature and who you really are authentically. And you're going to find that truly is nothing but love and forgiveness. It's really easy to say, I forgive, when we don't want to deal with it. And this is where emotional honesty comes in, doesn't it? We have to be emotionally honest. So, if you're interested in consciousness, your job is no longer survival anymore. Nobody ever tells us this except in consciousness work, that now our job becomes finding out who we are authentically, living our lovingness authentically. This can't be a fantasy love. Oh, I love. Oh, yes. But, oh, it's tragic. I choose the wrong people, but I'm nothing but love. Yes, you are nothing but love. But that doesn't mean that we don't have any discernment, guys. Discernment is part of the beneficence of God, for us to wake up and see exactly who we are. We also awake to something else that the ego child's mind can't comprehend. And that is, relationships are about loving. It's not about being loved. Do you understand that? Being alive and being part of this incredible system of the ascended God is about loving. It's not about being loved. It's not about running around in your deprivation, your belief in deprivation, and finding love. Because you don't believe you're lovable. There's a lot to wake up to here. You know, all of us want the same things, don't we? We all want a joyful life. We want to awaken in the morning, excited to go to work. We want to come home at the end of the day fulfilled and appreciated. We want to have a loving, emotionally satisfying, mature relationship with a partner. We want our children to be happy and have dynamic lives. We want to be creative in our own way, whatever the way that is, and to find our passion and our divine purpose ultimately. We want our lives to matter. We want to live in abundance and stop worrying about the lack of money. We want to know who we are. We want balance in chaos and reassurance that we're all going to be all right in times of change. Doesn't everybody want that? But if you don't have those things yet, it's simply that there's more to know about God. And by the way, that means there's more to know about you is the aspect of that. That's what it means. I find awakening and this work, and I think anybody who does this work with me or someone else finds it a real privilege to do. The awakening, then, is beyond what we currently believe. Do you understand that? And how you currently live. It's always out of the box. This is the opening of consciousness. This is how it works. Awareness is the first step. To stop at your current level of belief and hunker down in fear is to deny it all that you've got inside of you. All your potential lies squarely in the fullness of God. Staying in the understanding of absence, holding on to old principles, and the need to be right. By the way, you better look at that. Everybody thinks they have a need to be right. We all need to control, right? It all, actually, for anybody who's looking, it's showing you the opposite. It's showing you that you don't really believe in yourself. You don't really believe that there's God out there looking after you. That you believe in some sort of randomness. And there's nothing random here, guys. There's hidden order in chaos. Something is always moving behind the scenes. I was talking to a friend the other day, and we're kind of in the same boat. We're waiting for a bigger house, a different house. She's waiting for her life to unfold and be taken in a different direction. Which direction, she doesn't know yet. And I said, can you feel that things are moving, shifting, big things behind the scenes? Then put your confidence in that, because that's God. God knows what you want. Do that instead of going, I don't see anything yet. Oh, no, I'm so impatient. I'm so ready. By the way, if you're saying, I'm so ready, you're not. I don't know why, but whenever I hear that word, there are a lot of issues that are blocking readiness. So don't be fooled. I think one of the big things to understand about God is that the child's God that you grew up with is for children. It's for children. You no longer wear the sweater you wore in 5th grade. You're too big. And our beliefs and thoughts must change too. God is not the external power we were taught, like Santa Claus. You have to be a good little girl and boy for it. You've got to surrender what you've been taught. You've got to wake up to this. You can't have the church's God. You can't have nature's God. You can't have my God. All of these gods are part of the oneness of all life. It's all the same energy. But the only God that you can use is the God you are. I'll even go on to say it's the God you already are. But for the denial and you're looking away and the avoidance and the God you can use, the God that is there for you in every circumstance, the living God that travels with you, unlike that story that I told you about the woman's father. There are beliefs that don't travel with you in every walk of life. I happen to think that our God, our living God, the God of consciousness, travels with you everywhere, through sickness and health in every circumstance. God is present in the chaos and the order. God is the chaos and the order. But how many of us grew up with a God that was there in the good times but deserted us in the bad? What? What kind of God is that, kids? It's a God where you're not thinking on the highest level. You're not entertaining the energies that really exist in you. You'd like to believe them. Who doesn't? I mean, I think that's a worldwide thing. We'd like to believe in that lovely thing. But it's a matter of getting your mind there. What are the issues that are just wrong? What are the issues that are blocking you from that energy? What are the non-loving issues? And by the way, so many people think of relationships as being, oh, this glorious thing. Somebody's going to love me. This is wonderful. Why don't you think that fairy stories top with and they lived happily ever after? Because they didn't. The fairy stories don't adjust the fact that it's work, that relationships are supposed to uncover the unloving parts of you so you can find a deeper love in you and realize that indeed love is a privilege and much more important than being right or stacking the pans. You understand? Good. Many of us do not know this God, the ascended God beyond our misperceptions of energy when you're young. We push from our ego energy because of our insecurities and anxieties. We believe life is hard because we're in the absence of God. I was in theater for years, and I was a singer. I did a lot of musical theater. You learn as a singer never to push from your throat. You will harm the instrument. You rely on full lung capacity and correct breathing and aligning the voice and much more. But we've all learned to push from the ego. It's just like that. We think we're all alone, that we have to do it. We justify ourselves. We say, I have to be I said this 40 years ago. I have to be a narcissist to get where I'm going. Well, no, you don't. No, you don't. Mm-mm. It just supports us pushing from the ego child's mind. There's so much more that supports us. Having been on this journey myself, I'm going to tell you there's so much support that things are easy and effortless when you don't push from the ego. Radical change can happen. And if you are nervous about those words, I urge you not to be, because they are capitalized in my book, Radical Change. Radical change. It's God's movement to bring you what you want. But you better get ready for it, because change for the child's mind is scary. And then we throw up blocks without even knowing it. And when we throw up blocks, on some level we know it, so we start, but it's on sometimes a subconscious level, and that's when we start the mantras. I will do this. I will do. It's the atomacy there that ought to give you the heads up that underneath you don't really believe. Now, why is it important to believe? Why is that important? Here's the way you communicate with the universe. Where your energy is what you're going to get more of. If you're in your basement watching porn and you want a real relationship, nope, you're just going to stay in your basement watching porn. You've got to invest in what you need to invest in. That means taking classes. That means learning more than you learn. That means knowing more. That means being open to new information. That means developing your gifts. Your ego child's mind is functioning at the expense of your true nature. Do you understand? We reach for the easy fixes instead of things that will ultimately satisfy us on a deeper and deeper and deeper level. For example, I know of a woman who just likes to fantasize about the men that she meets online. First of all, she chooses these inappropriate men, and then they're already in a relationship before they've talked on the phone in her mind, right? And then they come in and she sees them several times, and she says, well, I've got to find out who they really are before I say no. No, she doesn't. She's just got to indulge in her fantasy. And then it never works out, of course. She doesn't want these people. They don't want her. And she moves on. And she does this over and over and over and over. Why? It's at the expense of being fulfilled and finding out what a real relationship is, and finding out who she is, and realizing herself as love, not as somebody who's needy and needs to be loved, so that you'll think better of her when you meet her. Really? Nothing at the expense of your true nature. Your true nature is your authenticity in God, the aspect of the living God you are. You'll find that when you accept more and more of your humanness. Here's the irony. This is why it's the esoteric journey, isn't it? The esoteric journey lies many times in the opposite of things. Your divinity is not something that you can seek. It's not something you can go to seminary for. Your divinity lies in your humanness and the acceptance of the human condition. Only then, when we are fully responsible for what we've done and have not done, only then do we awaken and become the spiritual beings we are in physical form. This is something that you can indulge in for just an hour on Sunday morning and then go out and live your life like you always have. You are a spiritual being in physical form, not the other way around. We live the other way around. But it is about taking some of that energy from our emotional bodies that shouldn't be there. Rage at this person or that, deprivation, jealousy about other people getting what you did not get, and more. And resolving all that so that you wake up spiritually. We've got to have you wake up spiritually. Then it's real. It's got to be real. It's amazing to me because we've had these omnipresent messages everywhere, haven't we? I mean, every religion talks about the concept of the singular God within us. Christianity says the kingdom of heaven is within you. Buddhism says, look within, you are the Buddha. Confucianism says heaven, earth, and human are all one body. The Upanishads say, by understanding the self, all the universe is known. I go back to the Trinity that we talked about. The Father, that part of you that gives the true ascended answers, the true God in you. That's the Father that is referred to. The Holy Ghost being everything that's God that isn't you. The tree, the cat, the beautiful air, the blue sky, the husband listening to something funny downstairs. all of that, the Holy Ghost, the computers that work sometimes. So one is the inner and one is the outer. What unites them? The sun. The sun. Oh, don't get hung up on the sun being something that is gender related. Forget the gender. The sun is just simply the human experience. It is the human experience that unites these two things, the inner and the outer. Without the human experience, God could not come through in whatever form. I should say God could not come up in whatever form, because it depends on what mind you're in. Pardon me, I've got the hiccups now. The Father, inner. The Son, human. The Holy Ghost, the outer experience. That's how it works. So you're denying your humanness, you're denying all these aspects of you that you hate, is part of the intelligence of consciousness work. You've got to accept it all. Accept everything that you've done and have not done. We all have things like this. We're all ashamed of this, that, and the other. Okay, we all have shame. So what? Are you going to accept that as part of you and your life experience and your decisions? Are you not? If you say, I am not, we can't fully open the Trinity for you to work as a working system, because the energy of divinity is in the acceptance of the humanness. You understand? I hope you do. Despite all of these omnipresent messages that we're getting from every religion, we hold on to a belief in an external hierarchical God. We limit our potential. Our egos, by the way, our ego child's mind is real comfortable with being limited. I mean, that's what they've done, right? They limit us. They say we can't do that. You can't do that. We've all learned to be not too great, not too energetic, not too expressive, or we'll get into trouble. But when our egoic child's mind dominates our experience, even the act of creating something wonderful is considered a hazard. Most children, after all, don't create anything in the big grown-up world. They don't make money. They don't take responsibility for themselves. Children generally expect others to do things for them. We have to wake up past the ego child's mind. I'm skipping ahead because our time is getting shorter. I think that the ego child's mind does a marvelous job in helping us understand our world when we're young. And if indeed you believe that we come in with certain soul issues to learn, there they are. We have perceived the world a certain way, not to have it hurt us, not to have it ruin our lives, not to implode in these issues, and not to, the other side is, work against them and, use all our energy trying to be somebody when we already are. We're supposed to look at ourselves. We're supposed to work on ourselves and free the energy up so it can go to its rightful place in the spiritual body. We're going to wake up over time to a more global perspective. It's a fascinating trip. In this, we have to confront fantasy. I've mentioned it once before. I'm going to say this. You've heard me say this almost every show. Fantasy is its own reward. You can't create out of fantasy. All children create fantasy because they can't stand reality. You may have a really, really awful dad. You create a fantasy dad so you can stand it. You may have a terrible mother. Scares you to death. Create a fantasy mother. Create a fantasy family, a fantasy you who never does anything wrong to get fussed at, you see. A fantasy, 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 fantasy. A fantasy God. Fantasy friendships. These are called, by the way, when you attach to people, you don't really connect with them. It's a fantasy friendship. They'll be there for me if I need them. They're there if I need them. Instead of knowing you don't need anybody there, you can give and love. And by the way, it's returned. That's the way things work on that level of the ascended God. Okay. Here's a fact. The ego child's mind will never, ever have what it wants. Accept it now. That's a big part of your spiritual and emotional maturity. Hi, Judy. Oh, I love that. Judy says, what I taught my children is that there is a knowing inside you. Once you realize that you know, that you know, that you know, this knowing inside you, you have accepted God and Jesus. Never cease in prayer. I love that, darling. I love that very much. The interesting thing about this is that that's the part of the creation formula we've talked about in previous classes, in previous radio shows, that we want to remind you that the formula for creating the life you want is desire, what you desire, plus knowingness that lives in expectation, plus any action you're supposed to take equals the manifestation of your desires. There are several places we can let ourselves down in the formula, but that big one is knowing. And I think one of the nicest things that anybody can say to you is not rushing in to fix things for you. That's often in the realm of codependency. But to say, my darling, I hear your problem, but I also know that God is in you right now, and there is a knowing in you about what to do. And I have full confidence in that. Judy, that's wonderful. Thank you for reminding me of that. I think, God either has us all or it does not. But what's your version of God? The ego child's mind God or the higher self's God? You see, that's what the show is about, isn't it? As a matter of fact, right now, I want to go on and stop and read you something with your indulgence, because I think this ties it together right now. Please get real prayerful, all of you that are listening to the show right now, and really take these words in. This is the age of individual consciousness. What you believe, the thoughts you think, and the actions you take from this moment on will determine everything. The world, as we've known it, is over. The business we thought would always take care of us, the stocks we invested in and counted on, and our families are not as they once were. Everything is now being challenged. Everything is changing before our eyes. No amount of yearning for the past, and no laws, ordinances, shouting, rhetoric, arguing, political wrangling, strategy, or religiosity will revive what once was. What matters is the individual, and what the individual does with all of this. By not realizing the personal opportunity at hand, some people sink into depression and they become afraid. Some flounder and feel lost, not knowing which way to turn. Some of us are angry. No matter what our biological age, some of us find ourselves desperately unhappy and wondering, is that all there is? You may be realizing that what you know about yourself has not brought forth the changes you desire. This is because what you don't know about yourself is keeping you stuck. You are wired mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually in specific ways on multidimensional levels. And on these levels, you work far beyond what you think you know about yourself. And that's the new frontier, the opening of consciousness. What it is, why you want it, and the steps to get there are what we talk about here. Most people are not walking around enlightened. Consciousness isn't the daily life most of us lead. It's the daily life most of us miss. We're going to be talking more about this next week and how to go about creating this for your life. Okay, I hope you've enjoyed today's show. Guys, let's do a little prayer. I think a prayer is certainly in order. By the way, the dog says hello. This is Tuffle. And he's got a bow in his hair. And he's been a very good boy trying to keep quiet for his mom today. Except for a little insertion once in a while. Okay, kids. I've thrown a lot at you. As you can see, thank you, Judy. As you can see, these shows are always packed with thought for you to entertain. I'd hate to think that you listen to these shows and then never give them a second thought. I would so suggest that you always have a notebook and pen and you write some things down that you'd like to think about through the week, because I think that's God talking to you and telling you that, that is something for you to consider. It may be something that absolutely challenges the ego child's mind's thought. And I'm all for that. Okay? Dear God, who is all there is, you who are all we are, and all everything is in this world, we thank you so much. We are here now opening to the truth that lies in your enlightenment beyond what we know about ourselves. Give us insight this week, dear God. We put ourselves in line to receive that. We will not look in that mirror and turn away. We will say, there it is. And we'll start being aware of how we use our egos in the world and our ego child's mind. And we'll say, is that really the truth? And we'll be able to see something beyond the appearances of things and what we've always told ourselves. Give us strength, dear God, to believe what you would have us believe beyond what we've been taught by our dear mothers and dads, the churches and schools. Open us to what really is. To what really is, who we really are as the living God, as the ascended energies, that we are born to be. We thank you so much, dear God, and we say this prayer now fully open and receiving. In your name, in the name of the ascended masters, our love-centered guides and friends, and in the name of each and every person listening to this show. We thank you so much, and so it is. Thank you, Peter, for saying that. Yes, we are trying to wake up in awareness again. Awareness is the first step to consciousness. Awareness, consciousness, enlightenment. That's our path. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for listening to this show. And these shows are free. I am delighted to do them for free. But what I ask is that you get the word out about these shows. We're trying to increase our conscious community for certain. And if you would help us do that through social media and word of mouth, we'd appreciate it very much. We will be discussing more about this very important subject. Hang on, I'm not sure. Well, I'll tell you what. Check my website, please, which is marthanovak.com, Novak, no C, Novak, about next week. I know that I've got some guests coming up, and I'm not sure whether it's next week or the following week. I think it might be next week. So if we skip a week, please go and listen to some of these archive shows. They're on Blog Talk Radio, they're on Facebook Live, and they're on YouTube. They all transfer to YouTube. So please listen to those things, and then we will be back with this subject as soon as I do the next show, whenever that is, whether it's next week or the following week. Won't be long, okay? And guys, stay well and healthy out there. I am just thrilled that you are such a devotee of this show. It means the world to me. And, I really want our lives to be lovely and for them to make sense as well. I think sometimes because religion is not for me, the pieces weren't put together in a reasonable manner. And I think that's why I went on the search for something more. I knew I was spiritual, but I didn't subscribe to a religion, which was a doctrine. I think the reason that I needed to was so I could see whatever it was I was supposed to see, which you were kind enough to entertain. I appreciate that with all my heart. God bless all of you. Have a marvelous next week, and be safe and healthy out there. Okay? Take care. Bye-bye.